On Daf Chesamid Beis, we have a sugya called Mana Ein Kan Mashkon Ein Kan, which means the following: that if somebody owes me money and he gives me a mashkon, I could take that mashkon and I could be makadesh and isha with that mashkon. And that's based on the famous principle of Rabbi Yitzchak, who derives from the pasuk L'cha tia leisha minayin lebal chov shekona mashkon. So when the love gives the malve a mashkon, the malve now owns the mashkon. So, for example, if that mashkon was chametz, then the malve would violate bal yirah bal yimotze. He owns the chametz. And if he takes that mashkon and he gives it to an isha and he says harei mekudeshesli, the Kiddushin is valid. And the drasha is a very phenomenal drasha, Rabbi Yitzchak. It says ulecha tziyat staka. That means if you give the mashkon back to the lova so that he can use it for sleeping purposes when he goes to sleep, and then the very next morning he brings it back to the malva, that's called tzedakah. And why is that called tzedakah? Tzedakah means when I give you something that's not yours. But apparently the malva owns the mashkon. Okay, let's begin with Tana Rabbanan. Now, this brisa, Tana Rabbanan, which is approximately 12 lines, 15 lines down from the top, is going to introduce a sugya, which the pivotal point of the sugya is she serious about the marriage? His kachi liba mana, she takes the mana v'natlasav v'zarkas aliyam, she throws it into the ocean. Oh, or in the case of Tel Aviv, she throws it into the Arkan. Oli, or she throws it into the fire. Olechol davar ovid, or she throws it in any place where it's going to be destroyed. Eina mekudeshes. Why? Because she's basically throwing it back to him and saying, I'm not interested in getting married to you. So the Gemara is now medayik from the Lashon HaBraisa, Hasha desinu kamei havi Kiddushin. If she destroys it, then it means she's throwing it back in his face. But if she puts it down in front of him, then it means she really accepted it as Kiddushin. So the Gemara asks the following question. I don't get it. Haka amro le shkil. Isn't she basically saying to him, here, take it back, lo be'inan, I'm not interested in your kesef Kiddushin. And the Gemara says, Einochi Navi, that's true, lo mi boy ka omar. We have to read this brisa based on the methodology of Ein Tzarech Lomar. What does that mean, Ein Tzarech Lomar? Lo mi boy shedesinu kamei delavi Kiddushin. It goes without saying that if she throws the money that he gave her for Kiddushin in front of him, she's basically saying to him, take it back. I don't want it from you. Aval zrakto leyamala, or I might think, keva de mechayva behu. Since if she doesn't want the Kiddushin, she now has to pay as an adam mazik, is therefore Kiddushin Kaddish Nafshin. Maybe she really accepted as Kiddushin so that she doesn't have to incur the money, the monetary loss for compensation for the hezek. The hadakov, the hachi. You'll ask me, so if she's really accepting it as Kiddushin, why did she throw it into the river? Sovra, she thinks, I want to check out this guy and see if he's an angry type of person or low. How is he going to respond when I take his money and I throw it into the fire, into the river? And a woman wants to be married to a man who doesn't get angry. As it says in Torah's Breslov, the worst thing in the world is anger. Kamash Malon, the Bryce wants to teach me, no. It's not that she accepted it for Kiddushin and she's just testing him to see if he's a kasan, but rather her intention was that even in this case, she rejects the Kiddushin and she throws it into the fire because she doesn't want to marry. Tana Rabbana, we learned in a brisa, his kadshi li b'mana. He says to her, I want to marry you with this mana. Mana is 100 dinar. And she responds by saying, Tneimli Abba Ulavicha. Take your money, give it to your father. Give it to my father. Eina Mekudeshes. She's just being melagleg, Ola. Melagleg means she's making fun facetiously. Give your money to someone else, not to me. But on the other hand, if she responds, give the money to my father, to your father, al menashi kablum li, on the condition that they accept it on my behalf, and they in fact accepted it on their behalf, mikudeshes, that's valid Kiddushin. Tana, we learned in a brisa. Abba and Avicha. Why did the brisa feel compelled to write both Abba and Avicha? Abba lo diacha kocha dereisha. To teach us how far-reaching is the Reisha, that even though she said, give it to Abba, give it to my father, you might think that she's serious about accepting the Kiddushin. No. And Tana Avicha lo diacha kocha de Seifa, to teach me how far-reaching is the din of the Seifa, that if she says, give over the most to your father, who's not related to me at all, nevertheless, we assume that since she said that your father will accept it on my behalf, she is setting up the Makadish's father as her shliach, and therefore the Kiddushin is chal. Brisa continues, is kachi li b'mana, t'neim leploni. She says, give it to so-and-so, he's not my father, he's not your father. And he went ahead and he gave it to so-and-so. Eina mekudeshes, she's only making fun. But if she says, Amanashi kablum li, on the condition that he will accept it on my behalf, mekudeshes, and l'chora, the Gemara points out, this is a repetition of what we just learned in the earlier part of the brisa. Utzricha, I need both. Di'ashmin and Abba v'avicha. When she says, Almanas, that your father, my father will accept this. Hasam, hu dechiyam ramanashi kablum li, have a Kiddushin. There it's a valid Kiddushin. This samcha daite luye. She has complete smichus das, relying as it were on her father or his father. Savra, she thinks, avdin li shlichuse. They would certainly want to stand and operate as my shliach and fulfill my bakasha, because of the close relationship. Aval, I would think that in the case of Ploni, someone who's not related to her. Lo, she doesn't have smichus das. She doesn't believe for 1 minute that that person is going to step up to the plate and serve as her shliach. And therefore, she didn't really have an intention, a serious intention, to appoint that person as a shliach. He's a fremde mensch. He's someone that she doesn't know. Inon Ploni, and if we had the last case in the brisa where she said Almanashi Kablum Ploni, who's not related to her, I would say Hacha. Here in the case of Ploni, who Dechiyamra Tneim Ploni Lo Avi Kiddushin, in the Reisha of the Sefer it says if she didn't appoint him as a shliach, she just says give it to so and so. Then it's not Kiddushin. Lo Makara Daite Gabe. She has no kiruv vadas, no relationship to this guy. Why would she give him matana? Obviously, she's just being malaglig. She's making fun of this whole attempt on the part of the Makadish to convince her to marry him. However, she has a kiruv das. Maybe she really wants to extend this wonderful gift to her father or to his father. And therefore, you could say that she really wanted to accept the kesef as kesef Kiddushin, but she wants to give a gift to so-and-so. And that takes us back to the Gemara on Daf Zayin of Mekudeshes Midin Ore. Yeah, that was Rava's Chiddush. Tana Rabbana, we learned in a brisa, is Kachi li b'mana. And she responds by saying, Tneim al gabi sela. Put it on top of this boulder and the wind will blow it away. Eina mekudeshes. She never accepted it and it never went into her rishus. and therefore there was never a kiikach, there was never a nesina. But im hoya sela shalah, if she owns that boulder, and therefore the boulder could serve as hachotzer mekudeshes. Boy, Rav Bibi has nothing to do with politics. Hasela shel shnei malu. What happens if the sela is jointly owned by two partners, him and her? Mau, what's the din? Teku. And the Gemara says we have no answer. Why? Because nesina means to take something out of your rishus and put it into the rishus of the ish. Excuse me, but here in this case, he himself is an owner of the boulder. He is a shutaf, so he never really took the money out of his rishus. So do we say no? That he is renting her rental rights to the boulder. And therefore she can operate with this boulder as if it were a chatzah. The Brisa continues. A man says to a woman, "Iskachi libe kikar, take this loaf of bread," and she responds by saying, "Tnei ulikela, go feed it to the dog." Eino mekudeshes, she's being malaglik. But im hoya kelev shalom mekudeshes, it's a valid kiddushin. Why? Because basically he's saving her Gainsburgers for that night, and she's accepting that as kesef kiddushin. By Rav Mari, but Rav Mari vacillates. Kelev ratzachre, her life is in danger because a rabid dog is chasing after her. And then she says to him, "Give that kikar that you want to use for kesef kiddushin, feed it to this dog, and save my life." Ma, what's the din? Should we say by for that great benefit that he saves her life by feeding the dog, she had a total full-fledged decision to marry him. Dilma, maybe Motzi Amalei, she could say to him, "You know what? Forget about Kiddushin. You have to feed the dog because midaraisa chiyuve machayves latzule." The Torah says that there's a mitzvah of hatzolas nefesh. It's in fact the greatest of all mitzvahs. So she didn't want to marry him. She never indicated that she wants to accept it as Kiddushin, because he has an obligation independent of Kiddushin to save her life. And there's a long discussion here about what mitzvah it is, lo tamid al damriecha, or vashivo salo. Teku, the Gemara leaves it as an outstanding question. Is kachi libe kikar tnei ulioni? Once again, we have the same story. Give it to the ani. But wait a minute. What happens if she's obligated to feed the ani? So if it's stam and ani, and she's saying, "Go give it, find a poor person down the street and give it to him," Eina Mekudeshes, she's just making fun. But what about an ani asamach aleha, an ani that depends upon her? She accepted upon herself to feed and to support this ani. And the Gemara explains, my time, or what would be the tzad to say that in this case she's not mekudeshes? It should be exactly like the case of a kelev shalah, which we said is mekudeshes. Amrolei, she could say to him, like she said to the guy who was feeding the dog to save her life, you're equally obligated to me mafarnes and to give mizonos to the oni as I. And here we go to Ahu Gavad Havikomaz Mizaben, a story about a person who is selling. And here we move on to Daf Tes. So let's just